Hello, my name is Hjalmar Gislason. I'm the founder and CEO here at Grid, and I'm going to show you how you can use Grid to build a simple calculator on top of your spreadsheet in just a few minutes. So let's start with a spreadsheet. In this case, we're looking at a spreadsheet that is a revenue model for a web page. There are about a dozen assumptions or so in the blue box here, and those assumptions are then used to calculate monthly numbers down here. So we have assumptions like an ad budget, the cost per click, some conversion ratios, like how many of your visitors register, how many of those registrations become subscribers, and so on. And these assumptions are then used to calculate the monthly numbers, like the total number of visitors, which is broken into organic and paid, how many registrations you get in the month, how many new subscriptions that might lead to, and then down in line 39 you have the holy grail of monthly recurring revenue. Now, whoever makes a spreadsheet model like this, and there's nothing particular about this spreadsheet model, there are probably tens of thousands of these types of models made in Excel and Google Sheets around the world every day. But whoever has built it is probably not just building it for themselves. There comes a time where you have to show it to someone else. Either you are a part of a team and you were tasked with putting together a model like this, or you put together the model and you now have to present it to someone else, maybe your boss or your peers, maybe an investor or someone else. And that's when you actually start preparing kind of the spreadsheet for distribution. That's when you start formatting things, putting some background colors on it, trying to make it a little bit more understandable to your audience, removing some of the data that you don't want others to see, and so on. And then you either share it in the cloud or you send it off as an attachment to that other person. We would actually much rather that you come to Grid and build out what we call a Grid document. So I'm here I'm logged into my account on Grid. I'm going to create a new Grid document. A Grid document is essentially just a web page. So what you get is a web editor. So let's just say, give it a title, Project Acme Revenue Model. And then we can put some narrative in here. We can just put something simple. Let's explore this revenue model. The editor is just, this is a web editor. It's a modern web editor. You can use all sorts of layouts and formatting that you would expect from such an editor, but that's not what's kind of most interesting about Grid. What's most interesting about Grid is what happens if you add a spreadsheet behind your document. You can do that either by uploading a spreadsheet from your local computer or connect to a spreadsheet that lives in the cloud, in OneDrive, in Google Drive, which would typically be a Google Sheet, or in Dropbox. And in this case, I actually happen to have my Excel file stored in Dropbox. I can navigate through the folder structure there, and I can find the file called Acme Revenue. And as soon as I bring that in, I can see that the spreadsheet file has popped up down here in this panel at the bottom of the screen. Now what I can start doing is I can hit this plus button over here and I can add various different elements. I'm going to add a line chart. I'm going to have that line chart show the monthly recurring revenue down in line 39. So I simply, as I would do in my spreadsheet software, I point at that and the data shows up on the chart. So there's no data preparation involved, as you might see with many other data tools, where you have to somehow change the structure of your data to some other structure that makes sense to the system. You just bring in the spreadsheet the way it makes sense to you, and then you point at things to create the charts. Very much, again, like you would do in your spreadsheet software. If you want the x-axis labels on the x-axis, you hit that option in this panel on the right-hand side, point at the months, and they show up there. Everything that you are configuring about the chart is happening here in this editor panel on the right. So if you want to put a title on it, we can type that in. Anything in Grid can be either a constant that you type in, a reference to the underlying model, or a formula, and we'll come to that in a bit. In this case, I've typed in the title. I could just as well have the title come from the model or from the spreadsheet. And the good thing about that is if I change the underlying spreadsheet, the changes will be reflected in here immediately. Let's change this from a line chart to a column chart and go into view mode. So in a relatively short amount of time, I've built a web page that is now shareable and kind of I could securely share with an audience of my choosing, that has a title, a narrative, and a simple chart on here. Now, you will also recognize that there are various other ways that you could have gotten to this point. You could have made the chart in your spreadsheet software and then copy-pasted that into WordPress or Confluence or wherever you wanted to, whatever you wanted to do to kind of to disseminate that. So let's get into some of the differences, how grid is actually different from these methods. Number one, because we connected the spreadsheet to the document, if we make changes to the spreadsheet, so let's say we change this assumption here to 4%, because it's stored in the cloud, when I save it and I go back to here, Grid will actually pick up on those changes from Dropbox immediately, and you will see the new data pop up in the chart without doing anything. So you can keep building your spreadsheet, your document, and the narrative with the images and everything that you want to put in there, and the data can be evolving along the way, and you can trust that all of the charts and all of the data visualizations in your document are showing the latest version of the data at all times. You can even have published your document, and if new data comes in, the latest data is always available in the grid document. Now, let's take this a step further. Let's take the data back to where it was, and let's assume that we would rather want to allow our audience to play around with these assumptions. So we can go in here and we can add, in addition to text and data visualizations and tables and sheet components that just look like the data does in the spreadsheet itself, we can add interaction elements. So buttons, checkboxes, input fields, and so on. In this case, we can add a slider, and we're going to link that slider. The target cell for the slider is going to be the same cell as we changed before, this conversion ratio of visitors to registered. We're going to put that label on there. We're going to pick that up from here so we remember what this is. And then as soon as I pull the slider, I can see the results of the changed assumption on the fly. And this is what allows us to do this is we have actually built our own spreadsheet engine. It's fully Excel compatible and supports about 200 of the 400 functions that Excel supports currently, which covers 99.3%, I think, of the spreadsheets that we see. And then that spreadsheet engine that we have written is running entirely in your browser, so all the interactions can be so smooth and fast. Now, in this case, I'm going to build out a full UI on top of the model that we had before. So I'm going to use the layout function. I'm going to click this bar down here to add a layout section down here. And then I am going to build in the different assumptions as we go along. So the first one is the add section. Let's put, in addition to the charts and the interaction elements, or the display elements and the interaction elements, we can add various text and media things in here. So let's put heading 3 in here, have that say ads, and then we are going to put in some components to change the budget. So first I'm going to put in here a input field that I'm going to tie to cell B4 for the budget, and that shows up immediately. Remember to put a label on it, which goes like this. And then below that, I'm going to add a slider for the cost per click here. Now you can see that the slider automatically picks up some range. In this case, it's kind of the next order of magnitude. So because the value was 1, it will go all the way to 10. We probably don't want it to be that expensive, so the max is going to be 4, and this is going to be 0, and then we want the step to be in multiples of 0.1. So now the slider can only jump in kind of 0.1, and it never goes higher than 4. Now this way we're going to build out the UI for the different parts of the model, and because there are at least 4 sections we want to build in here, we're going to add columns that I added by clicking this bar here. That makes this a little bit narrow, so I'm actually going to make this section a little bit wider so that it allows proper space for this. And then we're going to add the next section. So the next section is going to be the conversion ratios. I'm going to teach you a quick trick here. Instead of, as we did before, hitting the plus button and adding heading 3 in here, we can use markdown shortcuts, so 3 hashtags and then conversion, and that that these 3 hashtags means that the line that follows is a heading 3. So we already have the slider for the visits to registered ratio, so we're just going to cut that from here and paste it in here. And then the other thing that we want to build in here is the conversion ratio of registered users to subscriptions. Now the easiest way to do that is probably just to kind of go to the next line, paste this one again. It's still connected to the same cell as before, but by going into edit mode and hitting the spreadsheet icon in here, we can change that to being cell B9, and the label come from cell A9, and this way we can kind of use that. We can see that this maybe was a little bit too narrow, so down here in advanced we can make this wider, make this into large, and it probably makes sense to make this one large as well, because it simply looks nicer to keep them the same width, and then we have that set up here. Well, the next section, I'm actually going to skip the conversion lag and move to churn. So as before, 3 hashtags and churn, and then the churn is going to be a slider on top of cell B8. Now, I'm going to teach you another trick. Instead of going to the plus menu, you can hit the /. That brings up the same menu as before, and you can then keep on typing the name of the element that you want to add. S for anything that starts with S, as L. There's the slider. We hit return. The slider has been added, and we can even keep on typing the target cell. So the target cell in this case was going to be B16. So we can just type in here B16, and that shows up. We probably don't want the churn rate per month to be able to go all the way to 100%. So we are going to put a minimum of 0, a maximum of 40%. That's huge monthly churn that we're looking for. And then we probably want let's just say that we want this to be configurable in steps of 1%. And then that's what we get here. Then finally, the final section that we're going to add in here is the virality section. So the way the virality is calculated in here is basically that per every registered user, we expect them to bring in an X amount of new users, and per every subscribed user, which are the paying users, they bring in this case, twice as many. So virality, 3 hashes again, virality, and let's use input boxes there, / input field. Gonna point to the input field here. The input field is going to be tied to cell B20 in this case, and the label is going to come from A20. And then, as before, the easiest way to do this is probably just copying and pasting the previous one, and then editing that. And because it just comes from the line below, we can simply change these, and there we have that UI built out. So now we have a full UI with most of the assumptions in the model built in here, and we can easily see how the difference between, if we, for example, change the cost per click here, it doesn't change the shape of the curve at all. It just changes the scale, the amount of monthly recurring revenue that we are expecting. Similarly, if we take the budget up, it just changes the revenue, because we assumably have more users in there, but it doesn't change the shape of the curve and how they come in. However, as we've seen before, if we change the conversion rate of visits to registered, it does change the shape, and even more so does the churn. So the churn, if the churn is high, we're kind of losing users faster at some point than we are acquiring them, and therefore the number of users and number of revenue goes down. Well, here you can also see that the virality changes its shape quite a lot, and this actually points to the big jumps here point to that these are probably bigger steps than what we want. Let's go into edit mode again and change that. Edit, and then we want to set the minimum to 0, the maximum, well, doesn't really matter what the maximum is here, but the steps we want in kind of 0.1s or even 0.01, and similarly we want the same thing to be true for this one. So now everything works in while it's in edit mode, and now you can see that it changes that the changes are smaller. Probably kind of the in-between step, the 0.1 is the better one. So go in here, change that to 0.1, this one as well, onto view mode, and Yeah, this feels about right. So now we built out a full UI on top of this. However, there are probably other things that we want to show our audience as well. So with this set of assumptions, what does that mean? Quite likely, for example, that we want to know how much revenue we're expecting in the first year, or maybe even how much, what the monthly, sorry, how much revenue is the line 39. Or where we are with our monthly recurring revenue and what that means in terms of annual revenue at the end of the period. So let's see how we would do that. First of all, I'm going to go into edit mode again. I'm going to add these numbers here besides the chart. So I'm going to first make this wider as we did before. I'm going to add a column to the side. I'm actually going to make that column narrower than the other one to give the chart most of the space here. And then we could go in here and we could say, just year one and do the sum in here, and it would carry over through the cloud connection as we've seen before. Or alternatively, we can in here, because you've seen how you can carry your existing spreadsheets in here, you can also use your existing and leverage your existing spreadsheet know-how. So we can say something like expected revenue in year one is, then we hit the equal sign to see how it turns blue, and that means something special is happening. We're gonna, first we're actually gonna do the revenue in the first year, so that would be the sum of C39 to N39, and there we have equals sum. You can just type as we would in Excel or Google Sheets, and the number shows up, and there we have it. That number doesn't exist in the spreadsheet model, but it is now a part of the calculation. We can make that bold just to kind of call it out. Call it out a little bit, and there we have that. Similarly, annual recurring revenue in 3 years is, and then it's all bold, but well, let's unbold that, bold, and that is equals, and you can use your mouse as well here. We're going to go all the way to the end here, and we're going to say this times 12 because this was the monthly, and there we have that. We can then let's bold that one as well. So to call that out, and the formatting isn't great here, so we can go in here and then under the number format, we can either pick from existing. So number, for example, number by default has 1 decimal. That feels a little bit too much. So any option in grid, any option you can see here is actually something that you can control as a formula or as a constant as well. So we're going to go in here. This is going to show you, for those of you that are used to kind of format codes in Excel, you will know how this works. If I take this away, that number format is used for the numbers in here. And the FX button is what gives you access to things like these. Let's do the same in here. Actually, I'm going to just type it in, and there we have that format set. So this is great. Again, these are all tied to the various assumptions in here. There's one more thing that I'm going to add in here, and it's just going to give you a glimpse of some of the power that we haven't talked about at all, which is again that anything in grid can be a formula. So you've seen how we used formulas here just to add things onto here, but we can just as well use formulas to do other things. I love telling spreadsheet people, and I even love telling programmers, professional programmers, love telling them this more, that when you are creating a spreadsheet, as soon as you type a function, you are actually programming. Just instead of writing a program that gets executed line by line, you're encoding relationships between data elements that live in cells. And you can do many, if not most of the things that programmers can do in other languages. Just to kind of, as a quick proof of that, let's say that, in this case, we have an ambitious goal of making $20,000 in revenue in the first year. So I'm actually going to double click this. I'm going to copy the sum so that I have that in the buffer here. And then I'm going to say, again, we have a goal of making $20,000 in the first year, which is equals, and I do an if formula here, if the sum that we had before is higher than 20,000, then that is great. Otherwise, this is awful. And at this rate, it is awful. I'm going to unbolt this just to make it all look the same. Go into view mode. So at this rate, it's awful. Now what, I'm going to pull the lever, the conversion lever, quite literally, until, oh, this is great. Now I can share my my assumptions. Everything we make in Grid is private by default, but I'm going to update the access. We can share the document with a selected audience by email address or username in Grid. We can password protect the document and share the password with the audience that we want to have access to it. We can just make it public, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So share that in here. And then I'm going to copy the link to the model the way it's set, and then I can send that off to anyone, and they will see exactly what I'm looking at here in my screen. So that's how you build out, in a relatively short amount of time, maybe 15 minutes or so. I've built out a full UI on top of the spreadsheet model that give people a much better insight into, how the assumptions affect the outcome, what is important, what's maybe less important. And kind of get the story across in a very interactive and user-friendly way. By the way, we go to great lengths to make this work nicely across different media, so you can use this on your mobile phone and everything will function nicely. Most of us know that spreadsheets don't look terribly nice on mobile phones, or we can go into full screen mode and present this. If we're presenting this, let's say in a Zoom call, or when time allows us to when we're back in the boardrooms. So going from one mode of presentation to another. The final thing I'm going to show you here is that you can take the calculator that you built and you can embed that in other pages. The way to do that, share button again. We have the embed options down here. We can expand on that so we see what's going on. There's some embed code in here. We're going to copy that embed code. And if you have access to kind of a CMS system or anything else, that you just paste this code in there to have the embed work. Let's see how that would work on a website. Let's go to, let's just say to wired.com, and here we have something. Let's just click the first article here, and I am going to. All right. Let's not do this here then. Let's go to some other, let's go to TechCrunch and see what we can do there. Let's just open up an article in here, and I'm going to switch this image out for the calculator, for an embedded version of the calculator we just made. So I already copied the code, and now this is obviously just happening on my computer. I'm going to go into inspect mode. I am going to, and forgive me for the nerdy stuff here, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to edit this as HTML, I'm going to paste in the iframe code and then click outside it, and we can see how the calculator shows up. It's actually a little bit too narrow for this, so I'm going to go in here again, I'm going to make this both a little bit wider, let's say 900 pixels and 800 pixels high, and click outside again, close this thing. And now we can see how the full calculator is kind of fully embedded here and usable on TechCrunch's website. So if TechCrunch would have put this embed code into the code for this article, into the CMS system, then this article would have that embedded calculator now instead of the image it had before. So that's all I have to show you for now. There's a lot more to be said about Grid, especially the power of using formulas to control all sorts of things, all the options and everything else in here. But this is a fairly good kind of first overview. I look forward to see what you make with Grid, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or comments or ideas that we could talk about. Thank you.